Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me for week one of my class on Bach's time, his life in music. I'm Sophia Mitzik, a pianist, harpsichordist on occasion, piano teacher, and collaborator, currently based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And we're live broadcasting from the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra office. We are on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional territory of the Cree peoples and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We pay our respects to the Cree and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. I'm excited to present this class about the fascinating music and life of Johann Sebastian Bach. Many thanks to Matthew Praxis for monitoring the classes and questions. I will answer them near the end of class. Today, we will look at Bach's early life and work in the 6 cities of Eisenach, Ohrdruf, Nürnberg, Arnstadt, Mulhausen, and Weimar. Next week, we'll look at the 6 years he lived in Köthen. And from weeks 3 to 6, we'll explore his magnificent and extraordinary output of music while he lived in Leipzig from age 38 to 65. How do we know about Bach and his music? His music is ubiquitous in music conservatories and on concert stages. He is the culminating figure of the Baroque style and stands as one of the giants of musical history. His music is heard by people who may not be aware it is Bach, at weddings, on movie soundtracks, and in pop culture. There remain significant gaps in Bach's biography. According to his son, Carl Philipp Emanuel, who co-wrote his obituary, and which I'll mention a couple times today, he never wrote anything down. However, we are fortunate to know Bach through his strong presence in his music, which has endured. So let's talk about Bach. And there are so many Bachs. They were a dynasty of musicians dating back to the mid-16th century, a large family in northern Germany that had supplied musicians to the region's churches and town bands. Let's begin with Johann Sebastian's father, Ambrosius Bach. When Johann Sebastian was born in 1685, his family lived in Eisenach, a town in Thuringia. His father was a town piper. Town piper meant the director of town music in charge of musical events, and he was the member of the Ducal Kapelle. The Ducal Kapelle was a duke's court musical ensemble. What we know for certain of Bach's parents is that they expected their son to follow in their footsteps to make his life in music. In the towns of Thuringia, the name Bach was synonymous with musician. In 1693, once, when a vacancy opened up at the court capelle in Arnstadt, the count urgently called for a Bach. We need a Bach. Bach's father, Ambrosius, was also a violinist. Prior to Eisenach, he was a town piper in Arnstadt, and before that, he worked as a violinist in Erfurt, all located in Thuringia, which now let's find on a map. Just take a moment to share the screen. So here we have places of Bach's activities, and where I've marked one is Eisenach, where Bach was born. And then we will see his next place of residence is Ohrdruf. There's Arnstadt, which I just mentioned here. And I will just show you that Nürnberg, where he will be the 3rd city he lives in. And then he will eventually go down back to the middle in Weimar and then to Arnstadt again, and then Mulhausen and Köthen. So I will just leave that up there for a moment. Thuringia was one of the most densely populated areas in Europe, with countless small towns. Especially after the 30 Years' War, it was developing economically and culturally, and had intersecting trade routes, which offered the region more foreign influences in art and in architecture, particularly from the Italian and French traditions. Ambrosius was a well-appreciated town piper. There are records of praise for his compositions. Music with organ, violins, voices, trumpets, and military drums, as had never before been done by any counter or town musician as long as Eisenach stood. In 1685, on March 21st, on the old style calendar, Johann Sebastian was born and soon after baptized at St. George's Church in Eisenach. The four institutions, town, court, school, and church, formed the foundation of 17th century musical culture in Germany. And all four played an essential role in Bach's formative years and career. Public and official musical events were held at the town hall. The court's ducal castle had a kapelle, a music ensemble for the aristocratic patrons. The Latin school had a choir, and the church was home to sacred music floating up from the organ and choir loft. From the very beginning at his family home, Johann Sebastian lived in a hub of musical activity. The home atmosphere encompassed his father's professional activities, lessons, rehearsals, the collecting and copying of music, instrument repairs, and his father generally employed 4 assistants or apprentices who learned to play all types of musical instruments. Johann Sebastian, a young child, would be absorbing much and learning by osmosis. Let's have a look at his birth town and photos and St. George's Church. Here is an image of Eisenach. And now a photo of St. George's Church. And you can see it's a grand and imposing structure from the 12th century. And as well as we have a photo of inside of St. George's Church. And this would be in the center of the baptismal stone on which, at which Bach was baptized. The main square of Eisenach was the center of life, of town life, serving both townspeople and the ducal court. All of Ambrosius's sons would attend St. George's Latin School and likely take part in the chorus performances directed by their father. I'll add a fun family fact in that it was the Bach extended family custom to gather all together once a year. Their amusement at such gatherings were, of course, musical, singing, chorales, and popular and comical songs. Ambrosius had a cousin, Christoph Bach, who was a renowned organist, harpsichordist, and a likely inspiration to young Johann. To quote from Bach's obituary again, he, Christoph, never played in fewer than 5 real parts, 5 parts being 5 musical lines or layers in counterpoint. And his style was gallant and singing, as well as remarkably polyphonous. And he was daring in his composing. He had the courage to use the augmented sixth. And what does that sound like? And what does a gallant style mean? It refers to a fashionable music, one that sounds accessible and is immediately appealing or charming, perhaps simpler and with emphasis on the melody. When Bach was 10 years old, he had a particularly difficult year, losing both parents within the space of 9 months. Now orphaned, he, along with his brother Jakob, went to live with his older, by 14 years, brother Johann Christoph. Christoph was a town organist in Ohrdruf, where he lived with his family. He had earlier been studying organ and keyboard with Johann Pachelbel for 3 years. Yes, that Pachelbel of the famous canon tune. Anyhow, After only a year at Bach's new school in Ohrdruf, he was ranked first in his class, and he advanced to the highest grade at age 14, a full 4 years ahead of the average age of the class. During this time, he was a choral scholar, which generated some income, and he was also financially dependent on what was called a hospitia, the stipend and board he received for tutoring. Very importantly, while living in Ohrdruf, Bach was under his brother's guidance, learning the foundations of keyboard playing, and his focus and interest in the organ grew. There is a story that his brother had kept a book of clavier pieces that were denied to young J.S. despite his pleas. This book contained music by the most famous masters of the day and was kept in a cabinet with doors that consisted of only grill work. So in the middle of the night, once everyone was in bed, Johann Sebastian used his little hands to reach through the grill work and roll up the book. It only had a paper cover, and take it out. And in this way, he copied it all out by moonlight. When his brother found out, it was confiscated. But perhaps Christoph may have been right to have been upset by unauthorized copying of a valuable book or the potential loss of it. And this incident indicates no discord between the brothers, for they remained close until Christoph's death in 1721. Unfortunately, neither copy of this wonderful full book of music survives today. We do know that young Bach did have access to other collections and a broad range of keyboard literature from across Germany, Italy, and France. One of the principal Baroque methods of learning language and music entailed memorizing and copying the musical models of the eminent composers of the day. In this way, young Bach would learn the principles of music theory: harmony, counterpoint, rhythm, voice leading, and meter. So no autograph manuscripts or other actual documentation of Bach's earliest compositions pre-1700 have survived. The two main reasons were that, one, he wouldn't have wished to preserve them or to use them to teach. Secondly, they were also written in German tablature, as opposed to staff notation. German tablature went out of style in the early 18th century, and so these manuscripts were rarely preserved. I can show you an example. And this would be the German tablature, which I cannot decipher. Very interesting. According to the exit note in the school register in Ohrdruf, Johann Sebastian set out for studies in Lunenburg in the absence of hospitia, so he no longer had a stipend. Fortunately, in Lunenburg, he was able to attend the prestigious St. Michael's School, where as a choral scholar, he was furnished with the necessary stipends to finish his schooling. As we saw on the map, Lunenburg was well over 200 miles north of Ohrdruf. It would have seemed large to Bach with 10,000 inhabitants. Here, he was no longer in Bach territory, where he could have easily found an apprenticeship and been financially secure. But he clearly wished to continue his formal education. He would also be in proximity to Hamburg, the largest city in Germany at the time. With a great musical tradition, fabulous legendary organs, all that would appeal to a young, ambitious organist. So this move far away was likely of Bach's own free will. He had a strong independent mind, natural curiosity, and there awaited him the great organs of northern Germany to discover. During his lifetime, Bach was asked how he had contrived to achieve in art to such a high degree, to which he generally answered, "I was obliged to be industrious. Whoever is equally industrious will succeed equally well." There's no mention of talent or gifts. He was brought up from early childhood to observe the virtues of consistent hard work, but it was rare, truly, the quality, variety, and breadth of his musical experiences and the activities that would shape him in his youth. His extensive family of musicians and the professional surroundings at home meant he was exposed to every facet of musical culture. the apprentices, instrument maintenance, and most genres of music, sacred and secular, for either church, school, or the court. So back in Nuremberg, Bach continued his studies at the illustrious Latin school at St. Michael's, where the subjects of linguistics, classical literature, theology, history, geography, and physics were all emphasized. He read Virgil in Latin, the New Testament in Greek, and it's probably where he acquired a basic knowledge of French and taught himself Italian, C, an essential language for the educated musician. He juggled his school with varied musical activities and performances of diverse repertoire, old and new works, vocal and choral for liturgical and secular functions. And plus, he had access to the grand organ at St. Michael's and the harpsichord. Bach's great interest in organs would have made him very useful to local organists. And according to his son, Carl Philipp Emanuel, he soon met another major influence by the name of George Böhm. Böhm was the organist at the Church of St. John in Nuremberg. We have an idea of the compositions that Bach would have heard composed by Böhm, as they were included in the musical works that Bach made available to his older brother, Johann Christoph, back in Ohrdruf, who compiled them in keyboard anthologies. These anthologies were called the Müller Manuscript and Andreas Bach Book, and included Böhm's harpsichord suites of dances, 2 preludes and fugues, and the chorale partita, Jesu, du bist allzu schön, for organ, which we'll listen to in just a moment. There are also suites in the anthologies from Pièces de clavecin, pieces for harpsichord, by Nicolas-Antoine Lebigueur, which we'll also hear in just a moment. So first, the chorale partita by Böhm, and this is also found on the playlist. Very lovely music played by organist Peter Dirksen. And now I'd like to show you a pièce in D major from the book 1, the Gavotte, by Nicolas-Antoine Lebigueur. And this here will be played by Augustin Albers on the harpsichord. I find that very charming and appealing. So onwards, George Böhm played an important role in shaping Bach's background by introducing him to the genre of stylized dance in general, and to French music and performance practices in particular. Böhm also provided him with a model for composing preludes and fugues and models of other northern composers of the chorale variations. Bach's own compositional activities in these genres appear to have begun while he lived in Lüneburg. Traces of Böhm's influences appear in Bach's harpsichord overture in F major, BWV 820, the partita in F major, BWV 833, the suite in A major, BWV 832, and the prelude and fugue in A major, BWV 896. And just for clarification, BWV refers to the system for the cataloging of Bach's works. Let's have a listen first to the overture in F major, here played by Bach, played by Andrea Bonaldi on harpsichord. Great, and let's also have a listen to the suite in A major, the Gigue movement, played by Richard Egar on harpsichord. What wonderful harpsichord strumming. Importantly, Böhm also introduced Bach to the illustrious organ virtuoso Johann Adam Reinken, another significant influence on Bach. Reinken was in charge of one of the largest and finest 17th century organs at St. Catherine's Church in Hamburg. Bach made many trips to Hamburg from Lüneburg to hear Reinken play and was reportedly enamored with his instrument that the master kept expertly in tune. On some occasion, Bach improvised for Reinken, and it was said that after hearing this improvisation, Reinken remarked, "I thought that this art was dead, but I see that it lives in you." There was a mutual affinity between the wealthy Hamburgian Reinken and Bach. Reinken's musical personality was versatile. He had high intellectual ambitions and collected practical and theoretical musical literature. He also offered Bach access to organ repertoire, and notably the repertoire of Dietrich Buxtehude. Buxtehude was another virtuoso, organ expert, and represented an ideal of universal musician. We'll discuss this important figure that Bach journeyed to meet a little later. I will now show you a lovely painting in which we see both Reinken and Buxtehude. And the painting is by Johannes Voorhout. It's called Domestic Music Scene. It was almost certainly Reinken playing the harpsichord and Buxtehude on his left playing the viola da gamba. Around this time, as Bach is meeting Böhm and Buxtehude, he wrote some keyboard fugues, BWV 954, 965, and 966, which were particularly important in his development as a composer. A fugue, in musical context, is a compositional procedure characterized by the systematic imitation of a principal theme, called a subject, in a simultaneously sounding melodic line. These early fugues by Bach were based on material from Reinken's Italianate trio sonata fugues from his collection Hortus Musicus. Let's listen a little to an excerpt from Hortus Musicus Suite by Reinken. This recording is from the Harmonia Mundi label. I'd love to hear more of that. I love that second faster movement, the Allemande movement of the suite. The Italianate, stop share. The Italianate trio sonata fugues by Reinken offered Bach a challenge to modify and transcribe this technique into keyboard fugues. This trained his logical part writing, design, and integration of sequences, which Bach so often employs. In the spring of 1702, Bach graduated from St. Michael's School in Nuremberg. He either stayed with his sister in Erfurt or with his brother in Ohrdruf before taking his first professional job as court musician in Weimar to Duke Johann Ernst. This job as court musician was not all what it was cracked up to be, and apparently the court treasure registry described his position as lackey Bach, which shows he was regarded or hired as a minor court servant. He had to perform non-musical chores and valet services, which may have contributed to his leaving the court after 6 months only. The 18-year-old Bach, working in Weimar, had gained a reputation as a phenomenal expert in organ building and technology. And so he was called from Weimar to conduct an official organ examination of the newly constructed organ in Arnstadt. His profound knowledge was grounded in years of hands-on experience, the organ crawls as a child, observing repair work in Eisenach and Ohrdruf, and these all served as practical lessons and supplemented further with experience in Nuremberg and Hamburg. He eventually became one of the most sought-after organ experts in central Germany. With this official organ examination in Arnstadt, he was also asked to present a dedication recital, the organ's maiden voyage on stage, by Bach. For the recital, Bach may have played his well-known toccata in D minor, BWV 565 for organ, or something very much like it. A toccata is a type of keyboard music. Toccata means touch or something touched, such as an instrument. The musical form is usually free-flowing and improvisatory in style. Let's hear the great Karl Richter play some of it. This is really a great example of young Bach in a bold, virtuosic approach. I let this play a little longer so you could see the magnificent organ. Let's take a closer look at the structure of the opening, and we'll see how one musical idea helps unify the complete work. Here's the principal motive, or single governing idea, we could say. You just heard. And we hear this descending scale figure. And then it becomes inverted or flipped. And in the next part, we hear how a series of running variations stem from this motive idea. So again, the ascending motive. We hear the variation. That motive is embedded in that line. And then we hear this main theme in the fugue as well, which derives the principal motive in both forms. Again, it's that same line. It's very close to. This work has a strong improvisatory feel or impulse, yet at the same time is clearly structured and controlled, as we may say in analysis. Another important work by Bach from this period is the Capriccio on the departure of the beloved brother. And this is the music we heard played by Rosalind Turek at the beginning of today's class. At age 18, Bach was appointed a newly created position of organist at the new church in Arnstadt. Arnstadt was an old city in Thuringia, and where he stayed from 1703 to 1707 until the age of 22. Potentially, his organ recital following the organ examination in Arnstadt may have been a disguised or formal audition for this position. The primary duty for the organist at New Church was to lead and play for the congregational singing of hymns and play suitable chorale prelude introducing each tune. Also, Bach was to play preludes and postludes at the beginning and ending of services and during communion. Some minor conflicts arose with his Arnstadt superiors. Bach once took an extended leave, and he was also reproved for having hitherto made many curious variations in the chorale and mingling many strange tones in it, and for the fact the congregation has been confused by it. True, Bach had departed from the traditional models to an extent established by Johann Christoph Bach and Pachelbel, which included fantasia-like improvisations, choral elaborations characteristic to North Germany. Instead, Bach took a plain chorale melody and dissolved it in complex embellishments. And he would allow the home tonality to wander, modulate. Hence the strange tones and curious variations. As a young man in Arnstadt, the musician he was dying to meet was Dietrich Buxtehude, who we mentioned earlier. And so Bach set out to visit Buxtehude in Lübeck by foot, 225 miles north, in 1705. It was reported he asked for leave of only 4 weeks, but had stayed about 4 times too long. This is the extended leave I referred to earlier. Bach articulated his aim for going to see him as to comprehend one thing and another about his art. This points to Buxtehude's command as an extraordinary artist, organist, and role model for young Bach. Buxtehude was living the life, so to speak, in Lübeck, a city with a bourgeois, commercial, and a liberal atmosphere. He was able to develop his career as a virtuoso. He was a widely recognized organ expert. He traveled and was surrounded by pupils. His compositions covered a broad spectrum of styles and genres, including English elements, French manners, and Dutch, Hanseatic, and Italian traditions. Nearly all new genres of the 17th century are found in his music, including concerto, motet, chorale, aria, toccata, prelude, fugue, canzona, suite, sonata, dance, variation, and more. There are two oratorios by Buxtehude presented in 1705 that would have exposed Bach to a vocal genre, style, and manner he hadn't heard before. It's quite conceivable that Bach not only listened as an audience member in Lübeck during his visit, but also participated. Plus, this would help finance his 16-week-long stay and pay for his substitute in Arnstadt. Elements of Buxtehude's style, the design and splendor in his instrumentation are well reflected in the cantata by Bach, Gott ist mein König, BWV 71. Let's listen to the Monteverdi Choir, conducted by John Elliott Gardner, sing this wonderful cantata.
Gott, Gott, Gott ist mein König. Gott, Gott, Gott ist mein König. Von altes Will, von altes Will, von altes Will.
It's such glorious music. In Arnstadt, there was a native castle which served as the residence of Imperial Count Anton Guter II of Schwarzburg. His wife, by the way, loved music and theater. In terms of culture, the court was well connected with larger centers such as Beirut, Dresden, Köthen, Leipzig, Munich, Prague, and Weimar. This Count Anton Gunther insisted he must have a Bach again, serving the court after the death of Johann Christoph Bach. I guess this may have happened more than once. While musical life at this court is not well documented, Bach would have been likely drawn into the court scene, given his virtuosic talents and his background. The court environment, again, would have exposed him to more genres and repertoire that wouldn't have otherwise been accessible. How experience begets experience. As Bach began to outgrow the town of Arnstadt, he was already eyeing a position in the free imperial city of Mulhausen. Also at this time, he was becoming close to his distant cousin, Maria Barbara. After securing the new position in Mulhausen, he promptly arranged for their wedding, and so they were married. Interestingly, her two younger sisters married two Bach brothers. Let's listen to a part of a wedding piece Bach wrote either for his own wedding or a wedding at a slightly later date. Here is a Quadlibet, BWV 524.
Ist es Freund oder Feind, oder wie ist es gemeint?
Das muss ich verhandeln, sagt mir, wer nicht dort geheim.
Trägt ein großes Rad am Rücken, der Henker muss gestorben sein.
All wir Reichslicker so dumm,
Hat eine Trauermantel hat eine Trauermantel.
What festive and delightful music. So before we leave Arnstadt for Mulhausen, I'll just note that for his last 4 years in Arnstadt, Bach had near ideal working conditions. He was economically secure, he was in a socially agreeable situation, and with a light enough workload as an organist to have time for practicing, studying, and composing. At his church, he had the best gig in town, with an audience of 1,500 every Sunday attending service. So in 1707, the Bachs moved to Mulhausen, where for a year Bach would serve as organist at St. Blasius Church. Mulhausen was a step up for Bach. The city was the second largest in Thuringia, and Bach did not negotiate his salary much. He basically asked for what he received in Arnstadt, 84 florins a year. And he received sizable allowances, 54 bushels of grain, 2 cords of firewood, kindling, all delivered to his door. He even requested the assistance of a wagon. Therefore, he must have accumulated enough furniture, musical instruments, and books. Bach stayed in Mulhausen for barely 12 months, and one may wonder why, given the opportunities there. Apparently, he was invited to Weimar by the court and likely lured away by a higher salary and improved professional conditions. In Weimar, he was offered the post of chamber and court organist to the Duke of Weimar, and this new position he accepted on the spot. He would have a salary of 150 florins plus benefits including grain, wood, and 30 pails of tax-free beer. Here in Weimar, at the age of 23, he was appointed his first important position, and only 3 years later, he was granted a salary increase from 150 to 200 florins, equal to the Kapellmeister. Bach had a desire to try every possible artistry, as written in his obituary, and Weimar was ideal for his foci. His title of chamber musician was a designation his predecessor nor any member of the court capelle hadn't had before his time. Regrettably, almost all musical sources related to his work as a chamber musician in Weimar have vanished. However, one single source remains, a fugue in G minor for violin and continuo, BWV 1026. Let's have a listen. And that was, again, the fugue in G minor for violin and continuo, BWV 1026, played by the Musica Antiqua Köln. Good stuff. The lengthy passages, virtuosic figures are a clue to Bach's own impressive technique as a violinist. He was indeed also an exceptional violinist and performed as soloist and concertmaster in Weimar. There is also a long-held assumption that Bach began work on the wonderful and often played sonatas and partitas for unaccompanied violin at this time in Weimar. In the second part of Bach's life, while living in Weimar, the latter 3 years from 1714 to 1717, the reigning duke conferred upon him the title of concertmaster. The reshaped title was ranked just below Vice Kapellmeister. Bach himself requested the promotion, as he was in a position to do so after being offered the post of organist and music director in Halle. Bach negotiated well, and besides the salary increase and new rank, most importantly, he procured for himself a new assignment to perform new works monthly in Weimar. And so he was delighted with the opportunity to compose vocal works as part of his job. While Bach was very active in his cantata output in Weimar, the survival rate of These cantata scores, as well as keyboard and instrumental works, are only at 15–20%. Therefore, we are not left with such a balanced picture of his activity as court organist, chamber musician, and concertmaster at this time. Some of these losses are attributed to the dispersal of his estate when he died in 1750. In his obituary, his son, CPE, Carl Philipp Emanuel, attests that he wrote most of his organ works in Weimar. His harpsichord works belonging to the late Weimar years include at least the concerto transcriptions, BWV 972 to 987, the chromatic fantasy, BWV 903, it's on the playlist, and one of my favorite works by Bach, and because I'm currently practicing it, and the beginning of the Well-Tempered Clavier. It's certainly possible as well that most or all Brandenburg concertos date to the Weimar period. The style, how he adapted the concerto and explored daring instrumental combinations fits best actually into his cantata writing period. According to Christoph Wolff, the author of an incredibly detailed book called Johann Sebastian Bach, a learned musician, more than any period in Bach's life, the Weimar years catalyzed the formation and a consolidation of his personal style, a response to the modern Italian style. In the summer of 1717, Bach traveled to Köthen, where he soon signed an agreement accepting the post of Kapellmeister to the Prince of Anhalt-Köthen. This would be a good move for Bach since the Köthen court capelle offered a more attractive and promising situation. And we'll continue with Bach's life and music in Köthen at next week's class. And so hopefully we might have time for some questions now. I will look in the Q&A. And if anyone has questions about today's class, I believe they can type into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be able to read them. Some luck. Yes, certainly, Nancy. Thank you for your question. I believe he had just an incredible work drive, and the more he was so curious, the more he learned, the more he had to learn or realized he didn't know, and he had a lot of self-propelling energy. So it's very inspiring. And was he lucky? I guess we all he must have had some luck, perhaps along the way. And I have another question from Catherine. Thank you. Does the harpsichord predate the piano? Yes, it certainly does. I don't have the dates, but I will find that out in the next class and answer that question more fully. I'll certainly get to it before week 5 when we go into the keyboard wizardry of Bach. Another question here, were Bach's wives musicians as well? That's also a question we'll have to answer more thoroughly in another class. And another question, so I'm sorry, Susan, I would love to answer that question with a full picture a little bit later. And then from Sally in Lübeck, was Bach offered the opportunity to marry books to his daughter, like Handel? So that answer, I don't know. I did not come across it in the very detailed reading I have, but it may have been possible. Interesting. I did not know that about Handel either. Mm. Oh. Bach was born in the town of Eisenach, which is located in Thuringia. This is to answer the question, where was Bach born? And okay. So this question or comment is about Bach, that towards the end of his life, he visited his son, CPE, at the court of Frederick the Great. On this occasion, he had a chance to try out a new invention, the piano. He certainly did. I've heard this, and but it's not quite the piano that we know today. The grand piano as we know today has gone through quite an evolution, and I would love to cover this more thoroughly, maybe at the beginning of next class. Thank you, Audrey, for your question. Oh boy, what were all the instruments for which Bach composed and played, etc.? Oh, he really composed for, I think, any instrument available, and then he went to town combining instruments in various genres, violin and cello, every string instrument. I can't think of an instrument at the time he wouldn't have written for. But I will think about that question a bit more as well. Thank you, Tanya. And oh, this is a great question. What makes me especially interested in Bach, and does it have to do with our mutual interest in the keyboard? You know, I believe that's what it is. I've been playing piano my whole life, and only recently have been playing other keyboard instruments like the harpsichord and a celesta. Yeah, I've been playing Bach since I was young, and his repertoire just continues for all instruments, continues to really fascinate me. And it's just an ocean of discovery whenever I learn it. So yes, it's really a joy and exploration for sure. In Bach's music, there's also just the sheer variety. There's the Italian concerto, French suites, inspirations from all over. I can't imagine ever playing even all of his literature for piano in one lifetime. There's just so much that he wrote. Here's another question. What age was Bach when he started playing the organ? You know, I'm sure it was as soon as he was able to crawl up onto the bench and play and strike a few keys. There was a reference in my reading of his organ crawls, and I took it literally that he would be very involved in the organs, the maintenance at his family home in Eisenach. Oh, and we have another question. Do I have a favorite piece by Bach? Favorite piece? I don't even have favorite performers or ensembles. There's just a whole vast world of interpretation, recordings, repertoire. I'm always a little partial to works by Bach that I'm recently playing or currently practicing, as I'm sort of steeped in that world. Most recently, it would have been the Brandenburg Concerti. which I still have running through my mind this morning. And also keyboard works I'm practicing would be the Italian Concerto and the Chromatic Fantasy and Fugue by Bach. And as far as performers, there are many that I love to hear: Richard Good, Andras Schiff, Glenn Gould, and we'll be certainly hearing more of those on upcoming playlists. Thank you for these questions. We'll just wait another minute in case there are any more questions. So, all right, I think that may be all for questions for today. And I look forward to next week's class. And thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, everyone.